Bertha Russell just won the biggest social battle of her life, and it might have cost her the one thing money can't buy back. George Russell walked out of his own house and told his wife he wasn't sure he was coming back. And if the first details about Gilded Age Season 4 Episode 1 are any hint, this marriage isn't getting saved, it's getting buried. The first look at Season 4 is finally here, and it already feels like the calm before the storm. Let's break down everything we know so far, and what it really means for Bertha and George. Season 3 ended on the kind of scene that changes everything. And Season 4 is about to pick up right where the wreckage was left. George Russell survives a gunshot wound after being operated on without anesthesia, right there on his own dining table with Marion holding him together while Dr. Kirkland worked. He lives, but the version of George who walks away from that table is not the same man who sat down at it. In his last real conversation with Bertha, he tells her flatly that he is ruthless in business, never with the people he loves, and that he refuses to keep watching her move their children around like pieces on a chessboard. Then he leaves for the Union Club. When Bertha asks if he's coming home, he doesn't say yes. He says he isn't sure. That single line is doing a lot of work, and Season 4's first look seems built to sit inside that uncertainty rather than rush to fix it. The early details point to a season that opens not with reconciliation, but with distance. Bertha, fresh off throwing the most talked about ball of the Newport season, one that finally cracked society's rule about shunning divorced women, is entering Season 4 at the height of her social power. That's the cruel irony the show has been setting up. The same night she proves she can rewrite the rules of high society, she may already be losing the marriage that gave her the platform to do it. Every piece of the story so far has been pointing toward the idea that Bertha's win and her unraveling are happening at the exact same time. The real-life inspiration behind these two only makes the theory hit harder. Bertha is loosely built on Alva Vanderbilt, and George pulls from both Robert Baron J. Gold and Alva's actual husband, William Vanderbilt, a man who repeatedly cheated on her, including trips to Europe with a mistress. In real history, Alva became the first woman of her class to actually go through with a divorce, and that single decision opened the door for other women to do the same. Season 3 didn't just hint at this parallel, it built entire storylines around it, from the Aurora Fane divorce plot to Bertha's own ball breaking the taboo in real time. None of that was an accident. The show has been laying track toward a Russell divorce for at least a full season, maybe longer. And Episode 1 of Season 4 is where that track finally starts to matter. So what does the first look actually suggest is coming? Early word points to George keeping his distance in the opening episode, staying away from the Russell house and letting the silence between him and Bertha stretch out instead of forcing a confrontation right away. That fits the pattern the show has used before. The Gilded Age rarely blows up a marriage in one dramatic scene. It lets the cracks widen slowly, scene by scene, dinner by dinner, until the distance becomes impossible to close. My read on Episode 1 is that we don't get a fight. We get something quieter and honestly more unsettling. Two people who used to run every room together now moving through their worlds separately, each one still performing the perfect Russell marriage in public while privately keeping score of everything that's broken. Bertha, ever the strategist, likely doesn't fall apart. She adjusts. She probably tries to project total control to society even as her own household is falling out of her grip, because admitting weakness has never been something Bertha Russell does easily. George, on the other hand, may be the one audiences see softening first, not toward reconciliation, but toward finally admitting out loud that he doesn't know what he wants anymore. That kind of honesty is new for him, and it's exactly the kind of shift a near-death experience tends to trigger. If early details about his demeanor in Episode 1 are accurate, this isn't angry George or vengeful George. This is a man quietly working through what almost losing everything actually meant. That makes him unpredictable in a new way. And it's part of why this season feels less like a rebound story and more like the real beginning of the end, while Bertha and George's marriage sits at the center of Season 4's tension. Gladys Russell might be walking into the most emotionally dangerous storyline of the entire season. And the early details around her arc suggest the show isn't planning to go easy on her. Gladys enters season 4 newly married to the Duke and pregnant, which on paper sounds like the fairy tale ending her mother spent years engineering. Bertha pushed hard for this marriage, sacrificed relationships, and burned bridges with her own daughter to make it happen. And now that the wedding is done, the real cost of that decision is about to come due. A pregnancy in a story like this is never just a pregnancy. It's a pressure point, and the Gilded Age has never been shy about using pregnancy storylines to expose the cracks in a marriage or a family that everyone else assumed was solid. The historical parallel here matters just as much as it did with Bertha and George. Gladys is loosely modeled on Consuelo Vanderbilt, whose real marriage to a duke was famously loveless, arranged, and deeply unhappy despite its glamorous appearance. Consuelo herself later described the marriage as something closer to a business transaction dressed up in aristocratic tradition. And she spent years feeling trapped inside a life her mother built for her rather than one she chose herself. If the show continues pulling from that real history, Gladys' pregnancy could become the moment where she finally starts to understand exactly what she gave up and exactly how alone she actually is inside this marriage. Consuelo did not lose a child in infancy in real life, and that detail offers a small thread of reassurance that the show might not push Gladys toward the absolute darkest outcome. But reassurance is not the same as certainty, and the Gilded Age has shown again and again that it's willing to let its characters suffer in ways that feel uncomfortably real rather than safely soapy. A difficult pregnancy, a health scare, complications during birth, or even a miscarriage all remain very much on the table. And if the writers did go there, the emotional aftershock wouldn't stay contained to Gladys and the Duke. It would ripple straight back to Bertha. George has already blamed Bertha directly for pushing their daughter into this marriage, and that resentment has been simmering under the surface since it happened. If something goes wrong with Gladys during season 4, especially anything involving the pregnancy, George's anger toward Bertha wouldn't just resurface. It could harden into something far less forgivable than what we saw in the season 3 finale. Losing a grandchild, or simply watching Gladys suffer because of a decision Bertha forced, might be the exact kind of event that pushes George from uncertain and distant into something closer to done for good. That's what makes this storyline so important to the larger picture. Gladys isn't just a side plot running parallel to her parents' marriage. She might actually be the mechanism that finally breaks it beyond repair. There's also the question of how Gladys herself changes if this storyline unfolds the way the history suggests it might. Up to this point, Gladys has largely been defined by obedience, by trying to be the good daughter even when it cost her, and by trusting that her mother knew best. A pregnancy far from home, in a marriage that may already feel isolating, could be the first time Gladys truly confronts what she sacrificed and starts asking harder questions about her own life rather than simply accepting the role she was placed into. If the show wants to give Gladys a real arc this season rather than keeping her as a passive figure in her parents' drama, this is exactly the kind of turning point that would do it. Whether that turning point pushes her toward quiet resignation, toward resentment aimed at her mother, or toward some form of independence within the confines of her new title, remains one of the more genuinely unpredictable threads heading into season 4. And there's a wider question worth asking here too. If Gladys' storyline is being positioned this early and this heavily around pregnancy and marital isolation, the show may be using her to say something larger about the entire generation of women in this world. Women who were traded into marriages for status and then left to handle the emotional fallout entirely on their own, without their mother's protection and often without their husband's attention. Bertha spent years teaching Gladys how to survive in high society. Season 4 may end up testing whether any of those lessons actually prepared her daughter for the parts of this life nobody warns you about. Larry and Marian's relationship might be the quietest storyline heading into season 4. But quiet doesn't mean safe, and there's a strong case that this couple is about to face their most serious